Where am I going?
It's a mystery.
A Murder at the End of the World is a 2023 FX murder mystery miniseries from Brit, Marling and Batmanglij, the creative team behind 2011's The Sound of My Voice, 2013's The East, and the 2016 Netflix serial The OA. The pair have made a habit of playing with mystery in their work, from the central is she or isn't she actually from the future of The Sound of My Voice, to the increasingly bonkers metaphysical mystery box of The OA. But A Murder at the End of the World marks their first stab at a traditional whodunit, albeit one that, while respectful towards its roots, attempts to also reflect contemporary sensibilities. Emma Corrin, perhaps best known for their portrayal of Diana, Princess of Wales in Netflix's The Crown, and for being the first non-binary cover star of Vogue magazine, carries the series, appearing in every scene as the driven amateur sleuth Darby Hart, attempting to unravel the mystery behind the death of her old flame, Harris Dickinson's neo-Luddite conceptual artist Bill Farrer, at a secretive billionaire's retreat in northern Iceland. Darby is perhaps the clearest example of what Batmanglij and Marling are doing with this show, at once embodying classic mystery fiction tropes and nods towards the great detectives who came before, while also being a very modern character, a sleuth unmistakably cast in the reflection of the 21st century.
LA Times called her Gen Z Sherlock Holmes.
The brilliant detective with poor interpersonal skills, better at solving mysteries than battling their demons, is a trope almost as old as the genre itself, evolving from the aloof genius arms dotted with puncture marks of Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, via the hard-drinking, hard-boiled loners of Chandler and Hammett, to the point where every newly minted detective pounding the cold hard streets has an unmistakable vice, quirk, gimmick, or mental health disorder. Darby's demons are as much of their time as Holmes' 7% solution, an internet addiction, tendency towards hyperfixation and occasional Adderall usage, replacing the chain-smoking and alcoholism of many a hackneyed gumshoe. But really, Darby is birthed straight from the lineage that brought us Miss Marple and Murder, She Wrote's Jessica Fletcher, brilliant women underestimated for no other reason than being women.
No one sees a 24-year-old girl coming.
And in a clear nod to Angela Lansbury's iconic character, is even a writer herself, albeit not of murder mysteries, how quaint, but of true crime. This may be a series toying with larger themes, with serial killers, secretive billionaires, underground bunkers, and, yes, the end of the world. But it never loses sight of the humanity at the core of the story, a mystery seared with love, loss, regret, and hope. Darby isn't simply a detecting machine solving crimes as an intellectual exercise or for personal profit, but for the most human reasons imaginable.
I don't take cases for money. You do it for love.
This show may wear its inspirations on its sleeve, but they aren't a means to lazily tickle your nostalgia, although it would be naive to suggest its creators don't want to invite those comparisons and that audience.
I've summoned you all here for a good reason.
But rather in service to a broader vibe the show wants to give off. From the very first episode with the clear nods like this to the ghosts of the detective's past, to the unusual, visually arresting and remote location, the cast chock full of potential suspects, to littering shots with clues and red herrings. A Murder at the End of the World is spelling out that this is a fair play mystery, inviting your involvement.
All the pieces are there. You just gotta put them together.
Engagement is not just expected, but encouraged.
So everyone's a suspect.
This is a puzzle you can solve if that is your wish. And if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you should probably watch the show if you haven't already. Because while this video isn't about me recounting the plot and telling you who done it at the end, I am going to discuss a lot of things that will very much give the game away, including explicitly revealing the killer or killers. So from here on out, there are spoilers, and consider this your warning. I also feel it's fair to point out that if your want isn't dissecting mysteries, crushing the narrative under the weight of your intellect and racing to uncover the killer before you are given a concrete answer, this is also a show that you can relax and let wash over you, a very modern cozy mystery with a lot to say beyond being a slow burn guessing game. Because the ultimate conclusion isn't simply one that an eagle-eyed viewer could easily have reached on their own. In fact, a few of the clues towards the end may have been a bit too obvious, although they come so late that this is a minor nitpick. But when all of the suspects are brought together around the drawing room table, and we are told how it was all done, we are delivered a denouement that is at once surprising, no matter how much you'd already figured out, but also the only possible resolution not just to the mystery, but to the themes of the show. And we may as well start there, fittingly enough, at the end, for precisely the reason that, although it is the perfect thematic climax, some may find it narratively underwhelming. Because while there is a clear resolution and varying degrees of blame, there isn't a true culprit. An evil villain to be exposed twirling their moustache as the evidence mounts, and waiting to be carted away. In the show's big reveal, we find out that the murder of Bill was carried out by an innocent, Zuma Ronson, a child thinking he was just playing a game, and orchestrated by the AI virtual assistant, Ray, a meat grinder of existing information incapable of original thought, acting on a misunderstood outburst of anger from Clive Owen's billionaire Andy Ronson, because it takes instruction too literally.
You have to be literal. Ray's not good with poetry.
And for some, this may seem like a cop-out of an ending, lacking the catharsis of the bad guy getting their ultimate comeuppance, as much a staple of the mystery genre as the mystery itself. There is also the issue that it somewhat breaks the rules of AI as we understand it and in how it is presented in the show. You are on YouTube, so I doubt I need to explain that AI,
Artificial intelligence. I prefer the term alternative intelligence.
is, in the form we know it and in the form presented in A Murder at the End of the World, largely a marketing term used to describe machine learning, such as the much vaunted algorithm that us YouTube content creators have to bow down before, and pray deigns our videos worthy of finding an audience. Blessed be the algorithm, please take this offering and allow it to appear as suggested watching. Amen.
Are you on something right now?
Now, while A Murder at the End of the World does get a lot right about AI, its ultimate twist is probably the biggest issue with the story, and it's easy to see how some viewers were unable to suspend their disbelief for the idea that Ray, the AI assistant, could, under a vague instruction, concoct a nefarious plan to kill Bill using Zuma as a proxy. This would require a creativity and desire for subterfuge that would be impossible for any form of AI we have created, or could create, without explicit instruction, something the show is actually at pains to point out. From acknowledging that these machine learning tools we call AI can't think independently, that the inputs and outputs, the parameters by which these programs operate, are decided by its programmers.
But Ray isn't an artist. Ray is a tool artists can use. I'm the soul.
That their great skill is simply scraping the internet for information at great speed.
How'd you know that? It's not on Wikipedia.
And slyly showing us that the true use for this AI is to offer us what we already knew, that they replace effort and not insight.
There is someone at the door.
But this is dramatic license I'm willing to forgive, partly because it's a neat spin on the classic trope. The butler did it, a cute touch that also serves a deeper purpose. The reason that particular reveal became a trope is not in fact because it was overused, and there aren't an abundance of murderous manservants plaguing mystery fiction, with most examples playful jabs or subversions of the idea.
The butler did it? You gotta be kidding me.
In fact, by the dawn of the golden age of mystery fiction, this was already considered to be a trope to be avoided, as can be seen in the list of 20 rules for writing detective fiction, published by art critic and mystery writer S.S. Van Dyne in 1928. A servant must not be chosen by the author as the culprit. This is begging a noble question. It is a too easy solution. The culprit must be a decidedly worthwhile person, one that wouldn't ordinarily come under suspicion. There is a kind of classism in how this is expressed by Van Dyne, but it does get at the core rationale. The traditional murder mystery reached its peak in popularity during the interwar period. It was popular fiction centered around stories of wealthy elites, lords and ladies, colonels and clergy, spoiled heirs and bastard love children, played out in lavish manor houses replete with billiard rooms, studies and libraries. It was not only too easy, too obvious for any writer to cast suspicion on the serving class who were, after all, almost always present but rarely regarded, and with an inbuilt motive with which any audience member could empathize with no foreshadowing. If you had to bow and scrape around a bunch of wealthy infighting idiots for a living, you'd probably consider offing them and pinning the murder on a hysterical niece, or ne'er-do-well playboy nephew, too. But it was also cheating a reader who wanted to see an outsider bringing justice to those who would traditionally find themselves above it. And at the core of these stories is the idea that the ultra-wealthy may have a better standard of living, but that doesn't make them better people. Something completely undone if the sole cause of their misery is the only character in the book who has ever experienced what having so much as a callus feels like.
And who turns out to have done it?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. It would spoil it for you.
Oh, but none of us will see it.
In fact, insomuch as this trope exists in Golden Age mystery fiction, it is a red herring to be ruled out by our keen-eyed detective, when lesser minds consider it a possibility.
It was either him or the butler.
By nodding towards this trope and updating it in this way, Marling and Batmanglij are able to offer a similar commentary, not of the way the working classes exist unseen, doing the dirty work while the moneyed classes engage in drama and intrigue, oblivious to the people who serve them, but instead a commentary on the ubiquity of technology in our lives, similarly unseen but similarly ever-present, flying under the radar of an audience like the butler in so many country house whodunits. That the true role of AI in a capitalist society is not in furthering humanity, or even existing as a simple tool, but in replacing workers, something at the heart of the recent SAG-AFTRA and Writers Guild of America strikes, and something that can also be seen in the rise of, for example, AI therapy bots, replacing human empathy with rote-learned responses.
You've got no skin. How does that make you feel, Darby?
The reveal here is not simply a reference to a trope of past mysteries. It comes from an understanding of the functions of these tropes in past mysteries, and offers the commentary that these technological advances are being exploited to make the rich richer, at the cost of any care for human life. On top of that, it also leans heavily into one of the other themes of the show, that killers aren't interesting.
What are you saying?
I'm saying you want the killer to have meaning, and he doesn't have meaning. He's just a killer.
And are instead just reflections of the world that created them. And if that is the thesis for your show, then how better to express it than to make your killer a literal product? Not an individual with evil intentions, but a system with cold indifference towards human life. Itself nothing but a reflection of a world driven by systems with a similar cold indifference towards human life. After their experience with the OA, a show that aired its last episode in 2019, and still has a thriving community, spinning theories, plotting outlines for future seasons, and offering explanations for anything and everything left unexplained by the series' cancellation, doing deep dives into Gnosticism, the tenets of the Jewish Kabbalah tradition, Masonic symbolism, and ancient Greek mythology, among many other things, to find the answers that the show never got the chance to address, and probably never had any intent of answering through those lenses. Marling and Batmanglij will have known that by producing a show with an explicit mystery at its core, they were inviting deep dives into any and every seed of information they planted, whether it blossomed into a roadmap of alternate universes or left you scratching your head standing in front of a bricked-off door. And I think it is to Batmanglij and Marling's immense credit that they used this privilege largely responsibly, and did their best to use the imagined quest for justice of a murder of the end of the world to shine a light on real-world injustices. If you are aware that you are inviting an audience to dig for the deeper meanings in your work, you should probably give some thought to what you are asking them to find. Aside from the big reveal, this can also be seen in the show's parallel narrative, following Darby and Bill as they meet, fall in love, and ultimately break up, while solving the mystery of the Silver Doe killer, so named for the string of unknown Jane Doe victims, the only thing connecting them a piece of silver jewellery left with each body. It was this case that led to the true crime book that made Darby's name, and while it also led to her meeting Bill, her obsession with solving it is why he felt he couldn't be with her anymore.
I feel like I'd have to die for you to love me.
Despite this thread on the face of it being its own mystery, a more procedural investigation where a trail of clues left by the killer is meticulously followed, leading to a more traditional final showdown than the core narrative delivers. We are more pointedly denied the standard structure of a mystery, as the ending of this story is given away in the show's opening scene.
So I'm gonna start there, which is actually the end, which I was told you're not meant to do it at these readings, but yeah, I'm gonna do it anyway.
In fact, a great point is made of never showing us the killer's face or telling us anything about him beyond the barest details. Because despite what so much media tells us, killers in real life generally aren't super fascinating people. Codes that need to be unraveled, or cryptic or charismatic geniuses playing cat and mouse deserving of begrudging respect for their brilliance. They are broken products of a broken world. Serial killer movies are fun, sure. What would the world be without cinematic Hannibal Lecters or John Does? And I absolutely love mystery fiction in all its forms. From the cozy whodunits of Agatha Christie, the blood-soaked giallos of Dario Argento, to slasher films with a mystery element like the Scream franchise. My point in raising them in this context is to say that they don't reflect reality. They are explicitly fantasy, entertainment. And I don't think A Murder at the End of the World is criticizing mystery media by making this point either. In fact, I think it's clear its creators have a love for the form, illustrated not just by the nods and winks to the past, but also by their understanding that mysteries have always reflected and offered commentary on the society that spawned them. And in that way, it is telling that in the show, Darby is most well known for her work in true crime. The glamorization of real killers is a problem in media.
I have a feeling this guy is dying for company. He wants to be seen so bad, and I don't want to see him.
Whether that be in biopic or documentary form, as can be seen from the recent backlash against the casting of handsome young men to play real-life monsters, like Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer and Zac Efron as Ted Bundy. The question has to be asked about whether there is value in depicting these people in this way, whether our morbid curiosity is enough to justify humanizing or mythologizing people who should probably be forgotten, and whether recreating their crimes is respectful to the people who lost their lives and the families they left behind. What responsibility does true crime output and even news media hold? Should there be deep dives into the personal histories of serial killers, or analysis of manifestos of mass murderers? Is the purpose of this informing or entertaining? And are we justifying their despicable actions after the fact by giving them the platform that they craved? And beyond even that, are we encouraging others to do the same? A theory behind the Don't Name Them campaign being run out of Texas State University, aiming to pressure news media not to name mass shooters, with a similar school of thought leading to the French news outlets Le Monde and Le Croix, no longer publishing images of killers to avoid posthumous glorification. When a boring, broken person does something truly awful, why should we give them any attention at all? Isn't that just another variation of the big old mistake?
What's the big old mistake? I've been focusing on trying to find the killer, when I should be trying to understand the victim.
Because the people who matter, the people who should be remembered and celebrated, are the victims. And this parallel mystery is primarily about exactly that. The excellent Harris Dickinson's Bill Farrer may die at the end of the opening episode, but we spend the rest of the series never far from his company, learning why he mattered to Darby and why he shouldn't be forgotten. The Silverado Killer himself is purposely kept from the spotlight, or from any direct interrogation of his specific motives, partly because, who cares? He's a creepy man who killed women, and what more do we need to know about him? And partly because, just like the systems that the AI Ray reflects, he is also himself a reflection of a broken system, perpetuated through generations, causing damage and harm.
He's nothing. He's the result of faulty programming. He's the juice concentrate of a system that needs to be fed dead bodies in order to survive. He's boring and predictable, like the most basic code cycling over and over again until all the women are destroyed and the world just burns.
Despite Darby being a clearly brilliant woman, not just an expert detective who has already apprehended a serial killer who operated for decades, without the police even knowing they existed, but also a skilled programmer and hacker, not to mention a best-selling author. She exists in a world where people don't take her seriously because of her gender.
You're suffering from a brain injury and no longer making sense. I suggest you go back to your room, you lie down, and you wait for the professionals to get here.
An attitude that can even be found in other women.
In my gut, I felt you were right. I really did. but I overrode it. Because you're very young.
And a girl, you mean?
And a girl.
A world where female murder victims are just dismissed, tossed onto an ever-growing pile of unsolved murders with a hardened callousness.
Broad sciatic notch indicates the victim is definitely female.
Probably a domestic.
Or transient.
Get money in the Vikings this weekend?
Nah.
Where potential victims who escape from the killer are blamed for their own attack.
That was really brave. Did they tell you that?
The police?
Yeah.
No, they said I shouldn't have been out so late alone.
In both of their twin narratives, Marling and Batmanglij show that they are only interested in the killers, in so much as they are a reflection of societal structures, capitalism or patriarchy, that seek to separate us into dominant and dominated. And when we try to challenge these systems, we face a backlash from those who benefit. And it is hard not to see the real-life parallels between the treatment of Brit Marling's Lee, for being a woman in a man's world challenging that status quo, and the harassment and abuse suffered by Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu, among others, under the banner of Gamergate.
She wrote this manifesto on how misogyny was destroying the early promise of the internet. They doxed her.
What?
Made revenge porn, cut off her dog's head, put it on her doorstep.
A Murder at the End of the World even draws an explicit parallel between this behaviour and toxic and controlling relationships.
You were doxxed, stalked, terrified into disappearing from the world. You met a man, a powerful man who you thought could save you from all of that. Except it turns out he was all of that.
Entitlement handed down from generation to generation, reflected in systems of oppression to this day.
Walls of this world always seem so fucking high, so impenetrable. Like the world just has to be this one dumb way it was built forever ago.
Which brings us to the end of the world of the title, which simultaneously refers to both the isolated frozen tundras of the Troll Peninsula of northern Iceland where the murder in question takes place, and also to the climate crisis looming on the horizon.
200 million climate refugees projected by 2050. 26 trillion in damages by storms, wildfires and droughts by 2070. The facts are hysterical, but they are accurate. They are facts.
The climate crisis, like the murder of Bill that drives the show, doesn't stem from bad intentions, but instead cold indifference from fossil fuel companies and a tech industry driven by immediate profits, unwilling to change a system which benefits them, regardless of the consequences. As well as from a general public either desensitized by sensationalist news coverage, or left believing there isn't a scientific consensus at all, due to a false equivalency given to both sides in media debates on the topic, with a handful of climate skeptics presented as having equal standing as the bulk of the scientific community.
Climatologists who have been in the game long enough know how it's going to end. Sooner than you can imagine, and far, far worse.
One of the key reveals of the series is that this complexly remote part of Iceland is not, in fact, a hotel, but instead a bunker in one of the locations least likely to be severely impacted by the climate crisis. And the grand plan of the genius billionaire Andy Ronson is not to use technology to save humanity, but to squirrel himself away when the worst happens. An empire built on sand becoming a haven for a chosen few buried under ice. This sounds completely ludicrous, that the finest idea our best and brightest have is to just use the wealth they are hoarding to leave the rest of us to it. But it isn't science fiction at all. It is precisely what they intend to do. The media theorist Douglas Rushkoff, in an excerpt from his 2022 book Survival of the Richest, reprinted in The Guardian, recounts a meeting with a group described only as ultra-wealthy stakeholders. And what is said is so truly frightening that I'm going to have to quote it directly. After a bit of small talk, I realised they had no interest in the speech I had prepared about the future of technology. They had come to ask questions. They started out innocuously and predictably enough. Bitcoin or Ethereum? Virtual reality or augmented reality? Who will get quantum computing first, China or Google? Eventually they edged into their real topic of concern, New Zealand or Alaska. which region would be less affected by the coming climate crisis. Finally, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system, and asked, "How do I maintain authority over my security force after the event?" The event. That was their euphemism for the environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, solar storm, unstoppable virus, or malicious computer hack that takes everything down. This single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from raiders, as well as angry mobs. One had already secured a dozen Navy SEALs to make their way to his compound if he gave them the right cue. But how would he pay his guards once even his crypto was worthless? What would stop the guards from eventually choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival, or maybe building robots to serve as guards and workers, if that technology could be developed in time. They were preparing for a digital future that had less to do with making the world a better place than it did with transcending the human condition altogether. Their extreme wealth and privilege served only to make them obsessed with insulating themselves from the very real and present danger of climate change. Rising sea levels, mass migrations, global pandemics, nativist panic, and resource depletion. For them, the future of technology is about only one thing: escape from the rest of us.
What is this retreat then? Like an audition to get aboard?
Yeah, so like, what are we, the scholarship candidates?
They will be underground for a long time. They need halftime entertainment.
I want to call the reflection of this in A Murder at the End of the World a satire of the selfishness of billionaires. And Clive Owen's Andy Ronson certainly is that. A mewling paranoid man-child using his influence to cherry-pick from the brilliance of others. Mash it together with no thought as to the consequences and present it as his own work. A glorified magpie only interested in further feathering his own ample nest, and basking in the glory of his infinitely reflected sunlight. But is it satire when it is simply absolutely true?
What do you mean?
And money like that is always dark shit.
Amid the sea of interchangeable and distinctly unmemorable character names presented to us in A Murder at the End of the World, Andy, Bill, David, Martin, a roll call at the middle managers convention, Zuma sticks out like a sore thumb. This could be as simple as satirizing the ludicrous names billionaires give their children. And yes.
I mean, it's just X, the letter X, and then the AE is like pronounced Ash. Yeah. And then A12 is my contribution.
Oh, why A12?
Archangel 12, the precursor to the SR-71. Coolest plane ever. It's true.
But also perhaps a nod towards the mega wealthy, particularly in tech, and their attempts at absolute control over younger generations, shown here in microcosm as overbearing helicopter parenting.
Oh, no, please, don't give him that.
I'm
sorry.
Generations who not only can't afford their own homes, but are faced with the existential dread of the very world they call home no longer being habitable by the end of their lifetimes. The only distraction, trinkets dangled in front of them like keys in front of a baby.
She wants to read to him about King Arthur. I want him to be King Arthur.
These systems, plutocracy and patriarchy, age-old structures of oppression, bound together and enabled by a neoliberal capitalism that has created extreme wealth inequality.
The 8 richest men in the world hold the same wealth as the 3.6 billion poorest people.
A system that sees death not as a tragedy but as incidental, not even worth cancelling your tech bro dinner party for.
Bill's death is the era that we're living in. There's death everywhere.
And now threatens us with not 1 or 2 dead bodies, but potentially hundreds of millions.
Why hasn't he released that information to the public? People listen to him.
If you're on a plane that is about to crash, should one of the pilots really tell you how many minutes until impact?
At the end of this murder mystery, these systems of cold, icy indifference are the culprits revealed before us. And A Murder at the End of the World asks us to treat them with the disdain they deserve, to look after each other first and foremost, to catch those who fall or are in danger of falling through the cracks, and to stretch our imaginations in a way those systems have proven to be incapable.
Tell me, why is it easier for people like Andy to dream all this up than it is for them to imagine an end to capitalism.
Thank you very much for watching, and I appreciate if you're listening to this. It means you've made it all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this, please like and share the video. That stuff really helps. Feel free to check out my other videos. Maybe you'll enjoy those too. And if you want to see more of this sort of content, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you once again for watching. All of your support is very much appreciated.